Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here. Don't forget to subscribe. And today, before we dive into the topic, I just want to say this. Now, if you're watching this or listening to this on the radio, odds are, and statistically speaking, you're in cybersecurity and you're an American. That is, quite frankly, because I know my audience, the bulk of what my audience is. Now, if you're not in cybersecurity, et cetera, you are obviously more than welcome to this content as well, and we're trying to educate the world here. But I want to talk about what it means to be in cybersecurity. And quite frankly, before we dive into the topic, I think this is the important one to cover, because at our core, what we are is a service industry. We are here to help others in the same way that firefighters are a service industry in the sense that they're going to save you from a burning building. We're here oftentimes on the worst day of your business life, or sometimes the worst day of your life, when it comes to cyber attacks. And we see some of the worst things where businesses get shut down, or ransomware attacks essentially evade a whole bunch of systems and then put everybody at jeopardy in some way, shape, or form. And while it's not necessarily, getting cats out of trees or hauling people out of burning buildings, it's an important service. And quite frankly, when it comes to national security, it is one of the most important things that we have right now. And the contention that the cybersecurity community has, especially here in the United States, is that, quite frankly, we're at war. And we've been at war for more than a decade with basically what we've considered our adversaries, specifically Russia and Russian intelligence and all of their cutouts, not to mention China, North Korea, Iran, et cetera. And by virtue of that, one of those things that is just so beyond important to maintain is vigilance, essentially against these countries as they are trying to break into us. Obviously, we've got campaigns doing the exact same thing to them, and on and on. And so it's very troubling when I start reading news that essentially is the antithesis of making us more secure, or at least protecting homeland. And this would go for any country, on the planet. All of us have national security issues. I don't care what country you're watching or listening to this from. And so by virtue of that, I want to dive into this because this isn't political. And if you're a longtime listener or follower of mine, you know that I have a saying, and I'm going to say it again, that cybersecurity is agnostic to politics, but we're not immune from it. And right now in the United States, we're obviously going through some changes. Now, I do not care if you love or hate the current president, President Trump, and what he's doing. You might be a big fan of dozing it up. You might absolutely hate it and, wish ill will on him, all these kinds of things and in between. But what typically happens between a presidential transition, quite frankly, is a handoff. And right out of the gate, we haven't really seen that. So when now President Trump, then President-elect Trump, was sworn in on January 20th, essentially we had some issues that, quite frankly, were very concerning to me. Now, again, I'm not talking about Elon Musk or anything like that. I'm talking about the fact that usually when you have, let's say, new cyber teams coming in, or cyber leadership to Homeland Security, CISA, Secret Service, et cetera, there is a handoff. Hey, here's what we're working on. Here's what we're actively tracking. Most of the people that are in advisory roles are bipartisan. They don't care who the president is, and they've survived multiple presidents, whether it's W or Obama or Trump in his first term, Biden, now Trump in his second term. And so essentially to see those people summarily fired is of deep concern because, quite frankly, again, it's not a political thing, it's a national security thing, and it's something that I'm trying to understand and I'm trying to reconcile. And the way I equate this is, if you're looking at a battlefield, this is essentially removing the experienced commanders from the battlefield that are directing the troops, advising the generals, etc., because the generals just removed them, and now we're going to let the privates figure it out. And by virtue of that, we were getting reports that the tracking of Salt Typhoon, the Chinese intelligence, group, et cetera, were pretty much lost as a result of the removal of a lot of these top advisors at Homeland, at CISA, at Secret Service. And some recent news came to light in the last 24 hours that I'm trying to wrap my head around still, but quite frankly, I don't know how this makes us more secure because U.S. Cyber Command is now standing down on Russian planning. And it doesn't, to me, seem like a wise move. Now, again, this isn't political. This is simply the news. And quite frankly, Martin Matiszak of The Record had a write-up on this, And here's the nuts and bolts of it, because the new Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, this past week, like a few days ago, ordered that U.S. Cyber Command stand down from all planning against Russia, including offensive digital actions, according to 3 people familiar with the matter. Now, Hegseth gave the instruction to Cyber Command Chief General Timothy Howe, who then informed the organization's outgoing Director of Operations, Marine Corps Major General Ryan Heritage, of essentially the new guidance, according to the people that talked to the record, basically, and obviously speaking on the condition of, due to sensitivity, anonymity, they're speaking on anonymity. Now, the order does not apply to the NSA, or National Security Agency, which Howe also leads, or its SIGINT, or signal intelligence work targeting Russia, but this is important because while the scope of Hegseth's directive to essentially the command remains unclear, it's a bit more evidence that essentially normalizing ties between Moscow and Washington, D.C. is essentially the name of the game here. And the reason why that is also of concern is because, quite frankly, Russia invaded Ukraine in February of 2022. And if you're, again, a longtime listener and a longtime follower of mine, you know that's of deep concern. You can go to my YouTube channel, you can go to my past radio shows, and you can literally listen to or watch my interviews with Ukraine's members of parliament. I was actually interviewing their leadership. We here have been involved, in this conflict since the beginning. And quite frankly, anything that is acting as a bulwark against forward Russian aggression, quite frankly, in my mind, is a good thing. And that's not political. That's just the forces of history. Now, the exact duration of Secretary of Defense's Hegseth's order is unknown, though the command has been told that guidance will last for the foreseeable future. Now, General Heritage, who is expected to retire soon, knows all of the command's mission packages and whether they're in a planning or execution stage, and he would be responsible for contacting the relevant entities and telling them to hold off. That task likely now extends to the 16th Air Force, or Air Force's Cyber, and they are the outfit responsible for planning and conducting digital operations across U.S. European Command. Now, the sources said that Cyber Command has begun compiling a risk assessment for the Secretary of Defense, and basically it's a report that acknowledges, and the report acknowledges that they've received that order, and they're listing what ongoing actions or missions were halted as a result of that decision, and details what potential threats still emanate from Russia. Now, the implication of Hegseth's guidance is, quite frankly, uncertain, because if it applies essentially to the digital warriors here in the United States that are focused on Russia, this would only affect hundreds of people, including members of the roughly 2,000 strong Cyber National Mission Force and the Cyber Mission Force as well. So collectively, this is 5,800 personnel taken from the armed services and divided into teams that conduct offensive and defensive operations in cyberspace. It's believed that a quarter of those offensive units are focused on Russia, meaning we've now potentially built a gap. Because it's not just the NSA. There's a lot of different coordinations going on here in the U.S. government across the military, and that's what we're talking about. And however, if the guidance extends to areas like intelligence and analysis or capabilities development, then that number of personnel impacted grows significantly. The command boasts about 2,000 to 3,000 employees, not counting service components and NSA personnel working there in collaboration. Essentially, these organizations are so interconnected and collaborative that they're all out of basically Fort Meade in Maryland. So, basically, a command spokesperson deferred requests to the Pentagon for comment as the record was investigating this, and in a statement, a senior defense official said, and I quote, "Due to operational security concerns, we do not comment or discuss cyber intelligence plans or operations. There is no greater priority to Secretary Hegseth than the safety of the warfighter and all operations, to include the cyber domain," end quote. But if that's true, then why are they seizing ongoing operations? Again, there are handoffs. If these were, let's say, Biden directives that were a holdover because President Trump is something like 6 weeks into his presidency, I could understand that the new Secretary of Defense would want to get up to speed. Maybe he wants to alter things, all that kind of stuff. That would be keeping within the realm of transition of power. But to actually cease intelligence, to cease coordination of cyber offensive operations against Russia, that's of concern. And quite frankly, I don't understand this. Now, again, I'll say it again. Cybersecurity is agnostic to politics, but we're not immune from it. And it seems to me like there's political machinations here at play. And so by virtue of that, I think this is of deep concern. Now, I'm not necessarily drawing conclusions here, only in the sense that for all we know, next week they're going to reboot it and they're going to try and fill the gap and all of that. But to pause active situations here, especially on the cyber warfare front, is of deep concern. And so I'll leave you with that. I think this is something that is of concern. Obviously, we recently just saw in the last couple of days President Zelensky of Russia meeting with both President Trump, President Trump and Vice President Vance in the White House. It was a very contentious meeting as well, and it really is giving off the impression that we're no longer going to be allies of Ukraine, seeing as how President Trump also recently blamed Ukraine for its own invasion for some reason. I do not understand that logic as well. But again, I don't care if you love or hate the president. Protecting who we are, especially with such a wide surface area for attack on the cyber warfare front. And I've done video after video on just how local government, water, wastewater, other critical infrastructure is so susceptible to attack. To pause that front against what has been historically and traditionally an adversary is something that I think it really requires deep consideration, and therefore it is of deep concern. And so there it is. I don't know what else to say about this, but quite frankly, it's something we need to keep an eye on, and it's something that we can't let go, because if we fall even further behind, in cyber operations, that's to the detriment of us all. That is to the detriment of the critical infrastructure that runs our cities, that allows us to easily move money from one place to another in apps and all that kind of stuff. It directly impacts potentially our day-to-day lives, and we've already seen the damage that the Chinese can do, let alone the Russians. So I think this is something that is of deep concern. We'll see where this goes, but quite frankly, I'm not a fan of it, and I hope they correct it. And so if anybody in the U.S. government is listening to this and has the ear of the president, please tell President Trump to order the Secretary of Defense to resume planning on all of these cyber operations against Russia. And here we are. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please, please, please attempt to stay private, informed, and secure. Take care.